You've tried budgeting before, multiple times actually. You downloaded the app everyone recommended. You set up the categories. You tracked your spending for maybe a week, possibly two. You felt organized and responsible and slightly superior to people who don't budget. Then life happened. A busy week where you didn't log anything. A purchase you couldn't figure out how to categorize. A moment where you saw the numbers and felt so overwhelmed or embarrassed that you closed the app and never opened it again. Now that budgeting app sits on your phone, unused, judging you silently every time you scroll past it. You tell yourself you'll get back to it eventually. You know budgeting is important. You've heard all the advice. You just can't seem to make it stick. Here's what nobody told you. The problem isn't your discipline. The problem is the system. Most budgeting methods are designed for people who enjoy budgeting. They require daily tracking, constant categorization, emotional restraint in the moment of purchase, and the kind of ongoing attention that most humans simply don't have for something that feels like homework. The system I'm about to share with you is different. It takes roughly 10 minutes per week. It doesn't require you to track every coffee or feel guilty about every purchase. It works with human psychology instead of against it. And it's the exact approach that took me from financial chaos to actual, sustainable control over my money. If you've ever felt like budgeting works for other people, but not for you, like there's some gene you're missing that makes financial organization possible, keep watching. What I'm about to explain might finally make it click. Before I get into the system itself, I need to address why most budgeting fails. The standard advice tells you to track every expense, categorize everything meticulously, and review your spending constantly. This works for maybe 5% of people, the ones who genuinely enjoy spreadsheets and find satisfaction in detailed record keeping. For everyone else, this approach creates a psychological burden that eventually collapses under its own weight. There's a study from Rice University that found something counterintuitive about financial awareness. The people who improved their finances most weren't the ones tracking obsessively. They were the ones who maintained consistent, moderate awareness of their overall position. Too little attention meant drift. Too much attention created burnout and avoidance. The sweet spot is knowing roughly where you stand without turning money management into a part-time job. There's another psychological barrier that rarely gets discussed: the shame response. When people track their spending and see purchases they regret, the impulse buys, the subscriptions they forgot about, the lifestyle inflation they didn't notice, many experience genuine embarrassment, not just mild discomfort, actual shame that makes them want to avoid looking at their finances entirely. This shame response is why so many people start budgeting with enthusiasm and then abandon it completely. The tracking reveals things they'd rather not see, and the brain's natural response is avoidance. The very act of paying attention becomes associated with negative emotions. Any budgeting system that's going to work long-term has to account for both of these realities. It needs to require minimal, ongoing effort, and it needs to help you develop emotional neutrality about your spending, observing your money like data rather than feeling judged by it. That's what this system does. The core concept is simple. Run your personal finances like a business runs its finances. Every successful business uses something called a profit and loss statement, a P&L. At the top, you list all the money coming in. Below that, you list all the money going out. At the bottom, you see what's left over, your profit. If a business consistently has money left over at the end of each month, it survives and grows. If it consistently spends more than it brings in, it eventually fails. The P&L makes this reality visible and impossible to ignore. Your personal finances work exactly the same way. Money comes in, money goes out. The difference between those two numbers determines whether you're building wealth or digging a hole. The problem is that most people have no idea what their personal P&L actually looks like. They know roughly what they earn. They have a vague sense of their major expenses. But the complete picture, all income, all expenses, the actual net result, remains fuzzy. This system makes the picture clear with minimal effort. Here's how it works in practice. Once per month, not daily, not weekly, once per month, you're going to create a simple snapshot of your finances. This takes about 30 minutes initially and gets faster once you've done it a few times. At the top, list your income. Every source of money that came in during the previous month. Paychecks, side hustles, reimbursements, gifts, whatever. Add it all up. That's your revenue. Below that, list your fixed expenses. These are the costs that stay roughly the same every month and are essentially required for your life to function. Rent or mortgage, utilities, insurance, phone bill, transportation, healthcare, minimum debt payments. These are non-negotiable. You have to pay them to maintain your basic existence. Below that, list your variable expenses. These are the costs that change month to month and involve more choice. Groceries, restaurants, entertainment, shopping, subscriptions, coffee, personal care, travel. Everything you spend money on that isn't a fixed requirement. Add up all your expenses. Subtract them from your income. The number at the bottom is your net profit. What's left over after everything. That's it. That's the monthly snapshot. Income at the top, fixed expenses, variable expenses, net result at the bottom. Now here's where it gets powerful. After you've done this for 2 or 3 months, patterns emerge that were invisible before. You see exactly how much you're spending on each category. You see where money is leaking out in ways you didn't realize. You see whether you're actually profitable, whether you're building wealth or slowly depleting it. This visibility alone changes behavior. Studies consistently show that awareness is one of the strongest predictors of financial improvement. When you can see clearly what's happening, you naturally start making different choices. Not because you're forcing discipline, but because the reality becomes impossible to ignore. The monthly P&L also removes the daily tracking burden that kills most budgeting attempts. You're not logging every coffee purchase in real time. You're looking at your credit card and bank statements once per month, categorizing the spending after the fact, and seeing the total picture. This distinction matters enormously. Daily tracking requires constant attention and creates constant opportunities for guilt. Monthly review requires minimal attention and creates just one moment of reckoning, a moment you can prepare for and handle. But here's the key psychological shift that makes this sustainable. You have to learn to look at your spending like an observer, not a judge. When you review your monthly expenses, you're going to see purchases you regret. You're going to see subscriptions you forgot about. You're going to see patterns that embarrass you. This is normal. This is universal. Everyone who actually looks at their spending discovers things they'd rather not see. The skill you need to develop is emotional neutrality, looking at the numbers objectively, like a scientist examining data, rather than subjectively, like a person being evaluated. I spent $47 on coffee shops this month. That's not good or bad. It's information. I can decide what to do with that information, but the number itself is just a fact. I ordered takeout 12 times. Again, not a moral judgment, just data about how I actually behave versus how I imagine I behave. This emotional detachment takes practice. In the beginning, you'll probably feel some shame or frustration when you see your actual spending patterns. That's fine. Notice the feeling, acknowledge it, and keep going. Over time, the emotional charge fades. You become someone who simply observes their financial reality rather than someone who's being attacked by it. The people I know who are genuinely good with money all share this characteristic. They can look at their numbers without emotional distortion. They don't need to tell themselves stories about why their spending is justified. They don't avoid checking their accounts because they're afraid of what they'll see. They just look, observe, and adjust. This is a learnable skill. The monthly P&L practice builds it gradually. Once you have the monthly snapshot working, you add a simple weekly check-in. This takes about 10 minutes. Pick a day. Sunday morning works for most people. Make it pleasant. Coffee, comfortable spot, maybe some music. You're not doing intensive work here. You're just maintaining awareness. During this weekly check-in, you do 3 things. First, you check your account balances. Checking account, savings account, credit cards. Just look at the numbers. Where do things stand right now? This takes about 2 minutes. Second, you review any upcoming expenses for the week. Bills that are due, events that might cost money, anything you need to be aware of. This prevents surprises and helps you mentally prepare for where money needs to go. Another 2 minutes. Third, you do a quick scan of recent transactions. Not detailed categorization, Just a glance to make sure nothing looks wrong. Fraudulent charges, subscriptions you forgot about, automatic renewals you didn't expect. 5 minutes maximum. That's the weekly practice. 10 minutes total. Awareness maintained without the burden of detailed daily tracking. The combination of monthly snapshots and weekly check-ins creates sustainable financial awareness. You always know roughly where you stand. You catch problems before they become catastrophes. You maintain the visibility that drives better decisions. And you do it all with minimal time investment. Now let's talk about what you actually do with the information. Your monthly P&L shows a net number at the bottom, your profit or loss for the month. If that number is positive, you're building wealth. If it's negative, you're depleting wealth. Simple. The question becomes, what happens to the positive number? Where does that profit go? This is where you need a simple allocation system, not complicated, not 17 different savings accounts for 17 different goals, just a clear priority order for where surplus money flows. First priority, building an emergency fund. If you don't have 3 to 6 months of expenses saved in an accessible account, surplus money goes there. This is your foundation. Without it, any unexpected expense becomes a crisis that potentially derails everything else. In 2026, high-yield savings accounts are paying 4 to 5% APY. Your emergency fund should sit in one of these, earning real returns while remaining accessible for actual emergencies. Second priority, eliminating high-interest debt. If you have credit card balances, personal loans, or anything else charging more than 7 or 8% interest, surplus money attacks that debt. The guaranteed return of eliminating high-interest debt is almost impossible to beat through other investments. Third priority, retirement investing. Once the emergency fund is solid and high-interest debt is gone, surplus money goes into tax-advantaged retirement accounts. 401k, up to employer match first, then Roth IRA, then back to 401k if you can contribute more. Fourth priority, other goals. Everything else, additional savings, taxable investing, major purchases you're saving for, comes after the first 3 priorities are handled. This priority system means you never have to wonder where extra money should go. The answer is automatic based on where you are in the sequence. Let me address the elephant in the room. What if your monthly P&L shows a negative number? What if you're spending more than you earn? First, recognize that this is useful information. Most people in this situation don't actually know they're in it. They have a vague sense that money is tight, but they haven't quantified the problem. Seeing the actual number, even if it's painful, is the first step toward fixing it. Second, understand that negative cash flow only has 2 solutions: reduce expenses or increase income. There's no third option. The math is absolute. On the expense side, look at your variable expenses first. These are the categories with the most flexibility: restaurants, entertainment, shopping, subscriptions. These can be reduced relatively quickly without disrupting your basic life. Fixed expenses are harder to change, but often have the biggest impact. Housing is typically the largest expense for most people. If you're spending 40% of your income on rent, cutting back on coffee isn't going to fix the fundamental problem. Sometimes the real solution is moving to a cheaper place, getting a roommate, or making some other significant change to your fixed cost structure. On the income side, the options depend on your situation. Negotiating a raise, finding a higher paying job, adding a side hustle, monetizing a skill, these all take effort but can dramatically change your financial equation. Sometimes the most leveraged thing you can do isn't cutting expenses further, but finding ways to earn more. The P&L makes this clear. When you can see the gap between income and expenses, you can make rational decisions about whether to attack the problem from the expense side, the income side, or both. A few practical tips that make this system work better. Automate everything possible. Your savings transfers, your bill payments, your investment contributions, all of it should happen automatically without requiring you to remember or decide. Automation removes willpower from the equation. The money moves before you have a chance to spend it on something else. In 2026, setting up automatic transfers takes minutes. Your bank account can automatically move money to savings on payday. Your retirement contributions can happen automatically through your employer. Your bills can pay themselves through autopay. Build the system once, then let it run. Use a high-yield savings account for your emergency fund and any short-term savings. The difference between a traditional savings account earning 0.4% and a high-yield account earning 4.5% is meaningful. On a $20,000 emergency fund, that's the difference between $80 annually and $900 annually. Free money for doing nothing except choosing the right account. Keep a small buffer in your checking account. I recommend keeping a few $100s more than you technically need to cover expenses. This buffer prevents overdrafts during months when timing gets weird, when a bill hits before a paycheck arrives. It's cheap insurance against unnecessary fees and stress. Consider having separate accounts for different purposes. A checking account for daily expenses, a savings account for emergency fund, maybe another savings account for specific goals like travel or a major purchase. This separation makes your money's purpose visible. You can see at a glance what's available for spending versus what's allocated elsewhere. There's one more element that makes this system powerful: periodic review and adjustment. Once per quarter, every 3 months, look at your P&L snapshots together. What patterns do you see? Which expense categories are growing? Which are shrinking? Is your net profit increasing or decreasing over time? This quarterly review takes about 30 minutes and provides perspective that monthly snapshots can't. You might notice that your restaurant spending has crept up over the past 3 months. You might see that a subscription you forgot about has been charging you the whole time. You might realize that your income has increased, but your savings rate hasn't, a sign of lifestyle inflation eating your raises. The quarterly review is also when you adjust your system. Maybe a category needs to be split into subcategories for better visibility. Maybe your allocation priorities have changed because you've hit a goal. Maybe you need to set a specific target for a category that's gotten out of control. This isn't a static system that you set up once and forget. It's a living system that evolves as your life and priorities change. But the evolution happens quarterly, not daily. The ongoing maintenance burden stays low. I want to address the psychology of sticking with this. The reason most budgeting attempts fail isn't that people don't understand the importance. It's that the emotional experience of budgeting becomes negative, and humans naturally avoid negative experiences. Daily tracking creates daily opportunities for negative emotions: guilt about purchases, anxiety about account balances, frustration with categorization decisions. Over time, the brain associates budgeting with these negative feelings and starts avoiding the practice entirely. The monthly P&L system minimizes these negative triggers. You're only confronting your financial reality once per month in depth, with brief weekly check-ins to maintain awareness. The emotional load is concentrated and manageable rather than distributed throughout every day. More importantly, the framing of this system is different. You're not trying to restrict yourself or catch yourself doing something wrong. You're running a business, your life, and looking at the numbers to understand how the business is performing. This framing creates emotional distance that makes the practice sustainable. Over time, something shifts. The monthly review stops feeling like judgment and starts feeling like information. You become genuinely curious about your financial patterns, rather than defensive about them. You might even start looking forward to the end of the month because you want to see how you did. This psychological shift is the real goal. The specific techniques matter less than developing a sustainable, emotionally neutral relationship with your money. Once you have that, everything else becomes easier. One final piece that ties this all together: understanding why you're doing it. Budgeting isn't an end in itself. Nobody's life goal is maintain a perfect spending record. The purpose of managing your money is to fund the life you actually want, whatever that looks like for you. Maybe you want financial security, the peace of mind that comes from knowing you can handle unexpected expenses. Maybe you want freedom, the ability to leave a job you hate or take opportunities that require financial flexibility. Maybe you want specific experiences, travel, hobbies, time with family. Maybe you want to help others, supporting people and causes you care about. Whatever it is, that's your why. That's what gives the monthly P&L practice meaning beyond just tracking numbers. When you're clear on your why, the monthly review becomes something different. Instead of just seeing expenses, you're seeing choices that either align with or detract from the life you're building. Instead of feeling restricted, you're feeling intentional, directing your resources toward what actually matters to you rather than watching them leak away into things that don't. This intentionality is the real benefit of financial awareness, not deprivation, not restriction. The ability to consciously choose how your money supports your life instead of wondering where it all went. Everything I've described in this video is financial literacy applied to daily life. Most people never develop a system for understanding their money. They earn, they spend, they occasionally check their balance, and they hope things work out. Sometimes it does, often it doesn't. And even when it does, they're leaving money on the table, paying more in fees, earning less in interest, missing opportunities that require capital they haven't built. The monthly P&L system isn't complicated. It doesn't require special software or financial expertise. It just requires looking at reality clearly and making decisions based on what you see. But this is just one piece of financial literacy. Understanding how money flows is the foundation. Understanding how money grows, how compound interest works, how investing builds wealth over time, how to make your money work for you rather than just sitting idle, that's the next level. I made a complete breakdown of financial literacy that covers all of this, not just budgeting, but the entire picture of how money works, how to protect it, how to grow it, how to use it intentionally to build the life you want. If this system resonated, if you're ready to finally get your finances organized with an approach that actually fits how humans work, that video will give you the complete framework for taking control of your money. Because the truth is, most people spend their entire lives feeling vaguely stressed about money without ever developing real clarity. They work hard, they earn decent incomes, and they still feel like they're not getting ahead. The problem isn't their income, it's their system, or lack of one. You now have a system. Simple, low effort, sustainable. Built for how humans actually behave rather than how productivity gurus imagine they should behave. The only question is whether you'll actually use it. Pick a day this week. Sit down for 30 minutes. Pull up your bank statements and credit card statements from the last month. Create your first P&L snapshot. See where you actually stand. That single act, looking clearly at your financial reality, is more than most people ever do. And it's the foundation for everything that comes next. Your money is telling a story about your life. It's time to actually read it.